right, hello and welcome to Rise Zion. Today we're going to be discussing an article written by A.G. Jano, writing for Affirmation, the LGBTQ website. The article is entitled Gaiety at the Temple. Gay Men's Chorus of Washington performs at D.C. Temple Visitor Center. Now, to be clear, this article was written back in 2019. However, additional concerts at the Visitor Center have taken place, one recently, it appears, in 2023 on December 6th. It was recorded on the website Utah Stories, and they raise some very concerning questions, as you can see by the very top of the page here. The LDS Church, it says, invited the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. to perform at the Washington, D.C. Temple Visitor Center on December 6th to show its support for homosexuality. I've seen this article circulating on X and social media as an example, supporting the idea that the church has become lenient in regards to the doctrine of the family. We will be discussing the 2019 article because it was the first, and it expresses the thoughts and feelings of the people involved at the time. Now, over the past few weeks, we've been discussing the topic of apostasy within the body of the church, as we've reviewed Elder Holland's General Conference talk. And I think this may be a glaring example of what Elder Holland was talking about, how some people have redefined the definition of the pure love of Christ. Some of you may disagree with me, and that's okay. The purpose of this episode will be to just foster discussion, not division, and it is very important to discuss these issues. The Great De-Churching, written by Michael Graham and Jim Davis, is a book that discusses the reason why members of all the denominations of faith have been falling away. On the left side of the issue, you have people who are leaving because they perceive the church as not adhering enough to politically left principles, while members who are politically right are leaving because of the perception that the church is too lenient or not conservative enough for their liking. In previous episodes, I have made it abundantly clear that there will be people from both sides of the aisle who will try to convince you to abandon your covenants with God by using political division as the motivator. And I think we've seen that happening more and more often post-COVID. It is my belief that this division within the church, whether it be real or manufactured, constitutes some of the secret combinations among us prophesied by Elder Benson, and also the scourge mentioned in D&C 45, post the desolating sickness, COVID-19. However, I think it is very important to remember the words of Elder Bednar in his talk, in the space of not many years. These quotes will come from 3 different paragraphs. He says, first, quoting Mormon 8, 34 through 35, "Behold, I speak unto you as if ye were present, and yet ye are not. But behold, Jesus Christ hath shown you unto me, and I know your doing." Apostasy can occur at 2 basic levels, institutional and individual. At the institutional level, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will not be lost through apostasy or taken from the earth. At the individual level, each of us must beware of pride, lest we become as the Nephites of old. Elder Bednar is reminding us that the church, meaning the doctrines and priesthood to perform ordinances, will never be taken from the earth. Elder Holland affirms this from his talk, stating that this is the last dispensation. There won't be any more after this. We can be certain, therefore, that these important aspects of the church will never be lost. However, we need to remember that at an individual level, apostasy within the body of the church is still very possible, and that it can and will happen regardless of how you feel about the Gay Men's Chorus being invited to perform at the Washington, D.C. Temple's Visitor Center. On a personal level, I'm not exactly sure if this is an example of apostasy within the church or not. And the reason for that is because just because a group was invited to perform at the Visitor Center doesn't necessarily mean that the church is endorsing a particular lifestyle. Unfortunately, without additional clarification, there are many on both the right and the left sides of this issue who will view it as the church's tacit endorsement of behaviors that are not in line with church doctrine. What is absolutely clear is that this event, while it may have been intended to foster understanding, love, and to build bridges, the exact opposite reaction will occur in the long run without a firm stance on the issue. Let me explain from a political perspective how this will occur, and it all stems from many members' naive view of the world, unfortunately. Inherently, many members of the church, who are normal people, do not view everything that happens in their lives as a reshifting of political power or through the lens of politics. However, for those who hold a more Marxist worldview, They view everything through the lens of political dynamics, including art, literature, and music. Now, it should be noted that not everyone on the left has this worldview, but quite a few do. So when it is seen that the church is extending olive branches, this is not seen as a call of unity or love. This is seen as weakness. It is seen as an opportunity. Instead of fostering unity and love amongst activists, this activity will foster more harsh rhetoric and additional attacks on the church from those who perceive traditional family values as an oppressive power structure. Why wouldn't it? Meanwhile, you will also lose your base of normal, more conservative congregants who perhaps rightfully view your bridge building as pandering to a group of people who generally do not like the church or its teachings. Perhaps out of pride or a desire to be seen by the world as enlightened, diverse, and inclusive, all of the regular buzzwords associated with the progressive left. We've forgotten that we are commanded to be both like doves, but also as wise as serpents. We've certainly abandoned any pretense of wisdom in this case, in my opinion. I believe whether or not this was a case of apostasy on the part of the directors of the Visitor Center, Elder and Sister Chappell, it is my position that this was politically not a wise move on their part, or the offices of the church, as it seems they're involved as well. So let's just read from the article. This concert marked the first time the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has ever hosted a performance by the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. This came about when earlier this year, Dr. Stephen Whitehead, a member of the LDS Church, presented the idea to Elder and Sister Chappell, the directors of the Washington Temple Visitor Center. Dr. Whitehead works with a member of the GMCW, Emerito, and had attended a number of performances by the chorus. Elder and Sister Chappell welcomed the suggestion, listened to a recording of the chorus that touched them very much, and agreed to meet Dr. Thea Cano, the artistic director of the GMCW, to discuss the event. After meetings with Dr. Cano and her assistants, Elder and Sister Chappell extended the invitation to the chorus to be part of the holiday program at the Temple Visitor Center. Elder Chappell said that they were encouraged to make this step of outreach towards the LGBT community because they knew that the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, now the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, held a joint concert last year in California with the Gay Men's Chorus of San Francisco. Sister Chappell added that when they approached the missionary department about this idea, they were very supportive and saw the performance as a way to welcome all of God's children into this building and have them feel loved and accepted and valued and included. The Chappell's hope is that this concert is an outreach of love and warm connection through music for all of us. So this is really interesting because I wasn't even aware that the Tabernacle Choir had previously performed with the Gay Men's Chorus of San Francisco back in 2018. For those of you who don't know, that this was the same group who mockingly, perhaps facetiously, performed a musical number saying they were coming for your kids to potentially turn them gay and to make them less bigoted. Even if they were joking, though, does this sound like a group that the church ought to be involved with? Does this sound like they're particularly interested in building bridges to you? Now, it certainly is easy to criticize the actions of others who are trying to serve God. And that certainly begs the question then, what actions would have been acceptable if we were trying to show love to our neighbor? What actions would have been acceptable if we were trying to reach out to the LGBT community? And most importantly, what would be the fruits of such an outreach? These are very complex issues and questions, and they probably deserve a far more complex answer than what I can give. But one thing is absolutely clear. The church cannot be seen to be on the verge of surrendering its principles and priorities, to quote Elder Oaks, to appease the world, and perhaps it might be wiser to not associate with people who say they are coming for our kids. Ultimately, I believe that the fruits of any endeavor should not be capitulation of our principles and priorities, but rather faith, repentance, and baptism. So have our efforts led to increased baptism or retention of LGBTQ individuals? I'm not sure where one would even look to confirm such statistics, but my gut is telling me absolutely not. 1 Corinthians 14:8 says, "For if the trumpet gives an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to the battle?" Why would anyone want to stay in a mushy church that doesn't stand firmly on its principles? Let's continue reading as we learn what happened when Elder and Sister Chappell met with Dr. Cano during discussions about the concert. During the meeting, Elder and Sister Chappell expressed that they wanted to focus on diverse programming for the center's holiday concert series. Dr. Cano looked at the lineup of ensembles and groups performing at the center this month and thought it was an extraordinary representation of the DC community at large. Dr. Cano had come to the meeting ready to ask some hard questions. One of these questions was whether the chorus would be billed by its full name as the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. Historically, there has not always been a comfortable bridge between the local LGBT and religious communities, and over its 39 years, the GMCW has performed at other religious venues to which they were invited, but where their hosts were unwilling to use the full name of the chorus. This was a deal breaker for Dr. Cano, saying, "We are what we are." Not only did the Chappells agree that the full name of the chorus would be used, but they also wanted the concert to reflect the diversity of music that represents the chorus. After the concert, it was stated, "It truly was a beautiful concert and very befitting a season that celebrates the birth of one who taught love your neighbor as yourself and love one another as I have loved you." But what does Jesus Christ teach about the true nature of love? Elder Holland says, and I quote, "Down through history, many have simplified, even trivialized our image of him and his witness of who he was. They have reduced his righteousness to mere prudishness, his justice to mere anger, his mercy to mere permissiveness. We must not be guilty of such simplistic versions of him that conveniently ignore teachings we find uncomfortable. This dumbing down has been true even regarding his ultimate defining virtue, his love. First, Elder Holland said he loved with all of his heart, might, mind, and strength. This gave him the ability to heal the deepest pain and also to declare the hardest reality. In short, he is one who could administer grace and insist on truth at the same time. The true love of Christ, therefore, is defined as truth that is perfectly balanced with grace. And I seriously doubt that before or after the concert that the family A Proclamation to the World was read aloud to the audience. And why? Are we too concerned about what others think of our religious convictions? Are we too preoccupied about how Babylon perceives us? Let's read some more from the article. Mike, a gay man and former member of the LDS Church, also enjoyed the performance thoroughly, commenting about the uniqueness of seeing a gay men's chorus concert at an LDS visitor center. Mike laughingly said, "This ain't my mama's church no more." He added that he thinks this concert will relieve some of the tensions that exist between the church and the LGBTQ community, emphasizing that there is still a long way to go. He jovially concludes that this is a sacrament meeting that I would go to. Additionally, Aaron, James, and Mark are members of the Affirmation LGBTQ Mormons, families, and friends. They talked about how surprised they were when they first heard about the concert. James couldn't believe that the church would put the name of the chorus on its Facebook page. They all thought the show was great and was a positive step. Aaron commented about the dancer and wondered if everyone in the audience was comfortable with a shirtless dancer performing at the visitor center. They loved the song Dear December, but they were really glad to hear the closing song Make Them Hear You. So what I'm hearing from this article is that clearly this is being perceived as a capitulation of the church's stance. And it is, I believe, being viewed with the hope that the church will eventually capitulate and just accept it. There's still a long way to go after all. Here we read, one prominent audience member was none other than Jalynn Prince, having directed over 600 performances at the venue. She declared the concert to be absolutely amazing. She felt that this was one of the most, if not the most significant performances that she has seen at the visitor center because bridges were being built. Some unspoken things were being spoken. Now, what those exactly are, we're not sure what those things that were being spoken, but apparently something was being spoken, right? And the concert was putting a face on people from a community that typically remained hidden. She added, I think this was extremely powerful. What touched Jalynn most were the statements made by chorus members with LDS backgrounds. I assume they're all former members. It sounded like that's how they framed it. There's still fondness about the tradition. They're still carrying with them a part of it. I can only imagine, though, the loneliness of being separated from that, wanting to have a bridge there and not having that bridge built. I think tonight a lot of bridges were perhaps constructed to help other people not necessarily have to go through all of that angst. For me, this concert evoked a swell of conflicting emotions. I cannot deny that having the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. here is a huge milestone for the church. It does build a bridge and does raise hope that at some point in the future, the church may be more accepting of who we are as queer children of God. See, and that raises some significant questions, right? Because what exactly do they want to see change that would make them view the church as more accepting? We already view members of the LGBTQ community as children of God. What we don't do, however, is affirm that they have the right to do whatever they wish. Now, I certainly, let's continue. I certainly pray for all the young generation of LGBT members currently in the church, and I hope, as Jay Lynn said, that events like this can pave the way for a time when others will not necessarily have to go through all of that angst. I'm very grateful for the GMCW. All right, and that's just something else that I noticed. So not necessarily have to go through all the angst. So does that mean that that seems to be implying that he expects that the church will change its position on the LGBTQ issues to avoid the angst altogether, right? Now, that's not true. So anyway, let's continue. I'm very grateful that the GMCW and their willingness to be a voice and a beacon for the rest of us. I'm also grateful for Elder and Sister Chappell and the Visitor Center for hosting this event and doing what they can do to lay the foundation of inclusion. Again, my inclination is to believe that Elder and Sister Chappell did not act out of apostasy necessarily, or the intention to cause apostasy. From this article, it sounds that their intentions were well-meaning. However, as I mentioned, it was politically foolish. It is clearly giving people false hope that these so-called bridges that are being built will lead to an entire shift in the church's stance on these important doctrinal issues. Additionally, it doesn't sound like that during the concert it was made clear at all what the church's stance is doctrinally concerning the family, which would have offered additional clarification as to the purpose of the concert. Indeed, how can you even do that naturally as a part of the concert without it becoming awkward? Nevertheless, here we are in the midst of confusion as people on both the left and the right of the issue politically are drawing conclusions that may not be 100% accurate. If you are concerned about this issue, I believe that there are several actions that you can take that would be more than appropriate. I think that you can and should talk to your bishop, your stake president, and your Area 70 and ask them to provide additional clarity on this specific case. Because it is not merciful or loving to lead people along thinking that the church will change its doctrine. We should reach out only with love and not to condemn, right? We should reach out with only love and concern, not with anger or the spirit of contention. We always should show love to our fellow men, but the true love of Christ is truth balanced with grace. As we seek to build bridges, we need to be absolutely certain that our olive branches are not perceived as white flags of surrender. Now, if you haven't already, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this episode, and until next time, bye.